Hello, welcome. Welcome everyone. Welcome to this FutureFeed training session. My name is Rachel Leidy and I'm going to be conducting today's training. Looks like we have four other folks in the call right now. Just for everyone's awareness, this is a open training session. It's open to any FutureFeed user. Okay, so we do have multiple organizations, companies on today's session. Welcome. We still have some folks joining, so we'll get started here in a second. This session is being recorded, so that way after today, when we end the call, you should get a link to the recording, so you can refer back to it for if you need to for training purposes. Okay. And for the couple folks who just joined, just to let you know that this is an open training session. Anybody who's a FutureFeed user can attend it. And so we do have multiple companies on today's call. Today's session is FutureFeed training session number 1 for end users. We have two classes, 2 meetings, 2 sessions, whatever we want to call it, for training. This today, here we got a couple more people coming in. Welcome. Welcome, Rod. Welcome, Matthew. Um, all right, this session is I'm going to just give a quick recap since we had a couple more folks join. The session is being recorded, and you'll get a link to the recording after I end today's session. We are going to be training on FutureFeed today and how to get started with FutureFeed. I'm going to be able to get about halfway through the tool, through the process. Let me start sharing my screen so I can show you what I'm talking about here. Okay, so here's FutureFeed. Gotta close out a few of this stuff here. All right, can I get some confirmation you guys are able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. Move that. Okay, so and we're gonna be using this sample company today. I'm gonna cover getting started with FutureFeed. I'm gonna talk about the dashboard, start area, people, tools, documents, and then we're gonna stop at documents. The second session is gonna cover assessing controls and how to document them in FutureFeed, generating and reviewing and approving your system security plan, managing your system POAM, and some deliverables. So that's session number 2. Today is session number 1, so we're going to be covering the first half, and then second half is in another session. So I ask that when take what you learned today and go back to your environment and try to get some of that work done if you don't already have it done. And whenever you're ready to sit through that second training session, just register the same way you registered for this class. But to refresh your memory, if you log into FutureFeed, you scroll down to the bottom. The first link will bring you to the training registration link. Okay, so all of our training courses are listed there and you can register for them. This here, if you're not already signed up for this 15 minutes with FutureFeed, what it is, it's a weekly meeting with me. Unless I'm not around, somebody else will host it, but it's a weekly open office meeting with me where you can join every Thursday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. And it's a placeholder for you to just pop in, ask any questions you have about FutureFeed. Maybe you're stuck on something or you need a little guidance. I can help you. Also, we end up talking a lot about the requirements and the regulations in this Thursday call. It's a 30-minute session. That's a good one. You just have to register once and then it's on your calendar every Thursday and you can just join whenever you want to. Okay, so let's get started. Um, Hold on one second. Make sure I got everybody in. Okay. So I mean, hopefully you've seen FutureFeed. Some of you have been in FutureFeed for a few weeks now. Some of you may be very new to FutureFeed. Okay. So I'm gonna just start my training. I kind of, touch on, there's some things that I need to touch on and go over in every session, but you guys are welcome to stop me. And, I really want you guys to ask questions. This training is for you guys, and so that way you can use the tool to the best of its ability. Okay, so feel free to interrupt me, stop me, ask me any questions. All right, so when you first get logged into FutureFeed, you zoom in here, make it 100%. The first thing just play around, visit every page, get a feel for the flow and the look. But this area here, start, is where you're gonna start. That's why we named it start. How the user interface was designed is you kind of work left to right. So after start, you'd move on to the people section, get that populated and filled out, then tools, document, okay, left to right. Now you don't have to work that way. If you just got access to FutureFeed, but maybe you already had a system security plan developed and you already know the status of your security controls, you can just jump to assess, is where you would document the status of your security controls and how they're implemented. There's no right or wrong way, but the way I'm going to do my training today and a recommended way of populating FutureFeed is working left to right. Let's first take a look at this dashboard section. So here, it's your compliance dashboard. It's a nice graphical view of the compliance level for that framework you're in. If you notice here up at the top, you can change between frameworks. Okay, so here's a level 1 look of this this chart here. And here's level 2. Now, if you don't see any other frameworks listed here, that means that your company is not subscribed to them. So if you happen to also be subscribed to NIST 853 for RMF work, you could see it here. Anything that your environment is subscribed to, it would be in this drop down. Scrolling, this is semi-interactive, so you can drill down from the control. If you look down here, let's say I'm going to click on media protection, it changes to the media protection controls. Then you can even drill down further to the objective level to see status, and jump to that section of the system security plan, or jump to that control in the assess area to modify that status or see more detail. Assessment Prep Center, what this is, the first page here, reviews. These review assignments here relate to, like, if I click on this company info, it's going to bring me to the company info page, and you see this compliance review, it's assigned to Maxine. So this box here is present on 90% of the pages that need some sort of review, and then they're all listed in the dashboard section. So you see Maxine she's been assigned to review the company info corporate data page of FutureFeed. Each one of these is a section in FutureFeed. Okay, so the purpose of this assessment prep center, though, is, well, if you ever going into like an internal or external assessment, because FutureFeed is producing that system security plan for you and your system POAM, and it lists out all the control statuses and narratives, you're going to want to make sure that FutureFeed is populated and that data is accurate. Okay, and so this would be whoever's overall managing your company's compliance efforts. They would assign individuals to review that information depicted on that page and just make sure that that page is filled out all the way and the data is accurate. Critical dates, this is where you can plan out your overall CMMC compliance timeline, okay? These are phases of a CMMC assessment. So prepping is when you're working on implementing the requirements and getting compliant, and then you would engage a C3PAO for an assessment. They would do their assessment. After their assessment, they're going to tell you their findings, in which you will have 180 days to remediate those findings. If you remediate them and or you pass your assessment, then you get your certificate. So here's where you're defining that overall timeline. And tracking some critical dates. Team responsibilities, if you're managing your team, if you're responsible for managing the team, the compliance team, here's where you'd check in to get an idea of what each individual has assigned to them. All throughout FutureFeed, we use the RACI, R-A-C-I, the RACI model for assignment of responsibility. And I'll show you this a little bit later. But you could also view if anybody has any tasks assigned to them. So tasks are created under tools and documents. I'll show you that today as well. And then you could see, if anybody has any POAMs assigned to them and, drill down to that individual and see specifically what they have assigned to them. That's team responsibilities. When you click on an individual, then it does bring you to the individual responsibilities, because now you're just viewing the individual responsibilities assigned to whoever you clicked on. If you just click on individual responsibilities, though, it will by default show you your own. Okay, so here's everything that's assigned to me in FutureFeed: POAMs, tasks, RACI assignments. I don't have any in this environment, but so dashboards. This is where you'd sorry, I got someone waiting in the meeting room. Hello, welcome. So the dashboards is where you would, frequently check, at least for yourself, to see if you have any new assignments. Now up in this top right corner under user settings, if you go to my preferences, you can also set up some email notifications for any new assignments or tasks. So new POAM assignments, new RACI responsibility assignments, or new tasks. If you want to get that email notification, you'd configure this. Okay, so now if you're a FutureFeed user, not only will you get notification in the dashboard area of any new assignments, but then you could also get an email notification, which would then prompt you to log into FutureFeed and take a look at that item. All right, so that's the dashboard area. Any questions so far? Okay, so after you peruse the dashboard area, you're going to work within Start. So here you can kind of, hover over the menu and you can see the different pages and the information that's getting collected in here. This will help you identify, maybe who to assign that page to for completion, or who to engage to help complete that information in these sections. We're going to be capturing a lot of company information here. That's under company info. Scope is where you're going to start defining your compliance boundary, the system that you're configuring to meet the requirements. Contracts, you might need to engage your contract manager. Here's where you're going to list the company's cage code or cage codes, as well as define and identify your contracts that are introducing FCI and or CUI into your environment. Here's then where you identify if you have FCI or CUI in this environment and what specifically do you have involved, what data types, and then some platform settings. So let's go through them real quick. Under company information, some of these sections are pretty self-explanatory. I don't really need to mention much, but I'll just scroll through it. You got corporate data here, company information, address, contact information, logo. Down here is a place for you to define the company's risk appetite. This is what this information does for you, and where it comes into play then is within your system POAM, which is up here. It's called your FutureFeed POAM. So after you get FutureFeed populated, you may have a number of POAM items. POAM items related to security control noncompliance, or POAM items related to vulnerability scan results, if you choose to log those in here. So risk appetite is going to come into play when you have to start prioritizing your remediation efforts for your system flaws and non-compliance, and how aggressive you want to be with remediating those. Okay, so click on, you could hover over the green info dots to get some more information on some sections. Also, in every page, we have the getting started guide up here. It's like a user guide, and it's only going to present to you or show you information that is applicable to the page you're in. Okay, so we're in the corporate data section. This is the corporate data information. In here, then it will kind of tell you how to fill this information out and how to use this information, compliance implications. Here's some kind of consulting type information on how to fill out those sections. And then for the assessor, this is how is this information going to be involved in an assessment? Is an assessor going to look at this information, and why would they look at it? Okay. So every page has the getting started guide. So I check those out. Company description, what's the company size, NIAX codes, again, a place for you to define the company. Do you have a cybersecurity budget, IT budget, and do you have a cybersecurity insurance? Okay, placeholders to document that type of information. Locations, this is pretty important stop, because this is where you're going to first start defining your compliance boundary, or also referred to as your assessment scope. But you're essentially defining the assets that need to meet the NIST 800-171 security control requirements. And assets in the world of CMMC, assets can mean people, places, and technology, or even, physical paper assets. So, locations, here is where you're going to define all the locations your company is using, managing, owns. Okay. So just click on new location, give it a name, address, fill out this information, hit save. Once you hit save, then it creates this inventory item. And then you would open it up and start filling out the data, more of the data that's captured. So for this location, who's responsible for ensuring its security, accountable, consulted, informed. You start connecting the locations. Okay, so in NIST 171, there's at least six, there's more requirements that are related to physical locations. Okay, so here's where you want to start connecting them. You can search by the control number if you happen to know it. It's the 310 family, 3.10. All of these are physical security requirements. Okay, so you'd probably just want to hit add all. Also, you can search by keyword physical. Okay, we got a couple more, it looks like. We have media protection, which mentions some sort of physical, it says the word physical somewhere in there, so you might want to connect that. And then here's another one. At this point in time, when you're logging your assets, when you're logging locations and technology and documents, don't be afraid to over connect. If you're kind of unsure on what security controls you should associate with that asset, don't worry about being accurate right now, okay? Because after you log your locations, after you log your technology and your security documents, then you go on to the assess page where you conduct an internal assessment and you're identifying your evidence and your artifacts and the applicable assets. So it's at this point in time when you're doing that internal assessment where you're going to realize, well, it doesn't make sense that I connected this control to this asset. And then you can delete that and clean up the connections at that point in time. Okay. For the locations, I'm going to talk quickly about like what to log into FutureFeed briefly. And I'm going to talk about locations and technology. So up here. I've seen FutureFeed clients tackle it two ways. We have FutureFeed clients who have a solid understanding of their compliance boundary. They know the different assets that are inside their assessment scope and need to meet the requirements. And then you have clients who don't know that yet. And so some clients choose to only log what they know needs to meet the requirements, and then some clients choose to log everything. My recommendation is always to log everything. And I'll show you why. So what I'm about to say is applicable to the locations area as well. So here under technology and locations, I would log everything that your company uses, manages, owns, or operates. Okay. And then you log it, and afterward, then you click into it, open it up, go under the compliance section, and then further categorize. I'm not going to do this one because it's already got some settings. Go into the compliance section and then further identify if that asset is out of scope or not. So, if it's any one of these top 4 categories, then that asset is in scope of the requirements. If it's not, then you would mark it out of scope. Okay. And then once you mark something out of scope, I would go over to the overview section and provide that in the description why you said it was out of scope. This is just going to be beneficial for you guys when you go into that meeting with the C3PAO team, the assessment team. In their very first meeting or the second meeting, they're going to have, I'm sorry, give me one second. Sorry about that. So when you first meet with that C3PAO organization and the assessment team, in the preliminary phase, they're going to have a conversation with you and they need to understand your assessment scope. So they want you to tell them what you said was in scope of the requirements, what assets are storing, processing, or transmitting CUI data, what assets are protecting CUI data. There's a couple other categories, and also what assets are out of scope. They want you to tell them what's out of scope, and then they need to understand why you said something was out of scope. Okay. So documenting your analysis in FutureFeed is only going to help you when you have to have that conversation with the assessor, the assessment body. Okay. Because this, if you open this up, you'll say, oh yeah, we said that was out of scope. And why? Well, read the description. Oh yeah, that's why we determined it's out of scope, you know. And when you say something is out of scope, it has to be logically and physically separated from CUI assets. Okay, so if we're talking technology and you say something's out of scope, well, you'll tell the assessors, well, it's logically separated. There's no interconnection. Maybe it's sitting on a different, sub-network in your environment, or you have your CUI assets VLANed off and you have some access control rules applied on that switch or VLAN technology, whatever you're using. So then you might want to upload some of that evidence showing that logical separation. And an assessor may want to see that, to make sure that you did identify correctly all those assets that are in scope and out of scope. Okay. So it's up to you if you want to just log what you know is going to be in scope. My recommendation is log everything, log all the locations, log all the technology that your company manages, owns, utilizes, operates, and then rely on the categorization field and the description field to further identify those assets that are in scope and out of scope. All right, so that way you can document that analysis in FutureFeed and refer back to it if you need to. So same thing with locations. Under locations, we don't have the asset category drop down here yet. I did ask the dev team to add it, so you'll probably see it there in the future. But under a location, you can identify if that location is storing, processing, transmitting FCI right here, or you can identify if it is storing, processing, or transmitting CUI right here by clicking them. Yes, there's FCI there. Yes, there's CUI there. And then you would still, in the description, use that and then use the evidence field if you need to. Okay. Couple things. When you create an inventory item like this look that you're seeing right now, it's going to be when you log technology, a tool, a server, database, it's going to have this same look. When you log security documentation in FutureFeed, it has the same look. All right. So, and they all have active or pending up here. If you say something's pending, then it's going to be put on your system POAM. If you say something active, that's your company already has that acquired and it's implemented and being utilized. Okay. So when it comes to technology, let's say your company doesn't have a vulnerability scanner yet, but you're going to be purchasing a vulnerability scanner and you know what make and model you're going to purchase. You would log that into FutureFeed and then just mark it pending. Your company is planning to acquire this tool to perform vulnerability scanning, and you could track that then on your system POAM. Maintenance and ownership, here's where you're defining at a high level who owns the hardware, software, and who is maintaining it for you. If you want an idea of how to define that, refer to the Getting Started guides under compliance implications. Here's a table, and here's a example write-up on how I'd, fill out this section. All right, then scope, and here you're starting to define your system. You're giving your system of systems, you're giving your system, your compliance boundary, or your assessment scope a unique name. You're identifying the type of environment. Is this an enterprise-wide solution, meaning did you implement the NIST SP 800-171 requirements everywhere in every asset that's connected to your network? Or maybe if you just created a certain subnetwork, an environment, then that would be a enclave solution. And then organizational unit is for companies who have multiple lines of businesses, and maybe one or two of those lines of business are handling or doing military DoD work. Okay. Um, System, you describe your system and its boundary, the purpose of the system. That's scope. Nothing really to cover there. Here, if you're unsure what to put for confidentiality, integrity, and availability, um, at the very least, if you're working on CMMC level 2, CMMC level 2, then your confidentiality rating should be a moderate. You could choose to make it a high, but it's either a moderate or high. Don't set it to low. Um, I don't I don't think I have time to get into that, but CMMC is only concerned about the confidentiality of data. Okay, so integrity and availability, it's up to your company to choose uh, what impact level for integrity and availability. Contracts here, cage code or cage code, codes, you can have multiple. Your system security plan, though, is associated with a cage code or cage codes. So you would fill this out and it's going to be showing up in your system security plan. I guess I didn't realize that we have that note there. Here is a place for you to log contracts. That's the data, the fields that are captured. This is a very useful area, especially if you're still trying to determine what your assessment scope is going to be, what assets need to be meeting these requirements. All of that discussion and that analysis, it always starts with, well, what contracts does our company currently have? Which contracts are introducing CUI or FCI into our environment? And then from there, you track and you trace wherever that data goes, whoever it's, whoever you share it with, wherever you store it, whatever systems access it, you track it. And that's how you are identifying your assessment scope. I mean, there's more steps than that, but to summarize it, I guess. So what contracts and then what clause is present in those contracts that are driving the need for CMMC? Okay, if it's an FCI boundary, then you just have the FAR 52 clause, 70, 12, 19, 20, 21. These are all CMMC clauses. And then here's some export control clauses, which is essential to a track as well. Data inventory. So after you identify your contracts, you move on to very clearly identifying the data type. Okay, so FCI does this system have FCI in it? And if so, what tools? So down here is just a listing of the technology or the tools that you've added, and it's as simple as toggling things on and off. Yes, this asset, we are using email to store, process, or transmit FCI data, or no. Now, when you get to this point, if you've not up here under tools, if you've not added your technology into FutureFeed, then this is going to be blank. So you do have to go and populate the tools section and then come back here to then identify which of those tools, which of those assets are storing, processing, or transmitting FCI. Here's your CUI data inventory. So this gets very granular down to the categories of CUI. Typically, people in the defense industrial base CMMC realm are working mostly with controlled technical information. I've personally not met anybody using the latter three here, but I guess you could be, it depends on your contract. What. Is the CUI what type of CUI is specified in that contract? Is it CUI basic or is it CUI specified? And so here you're just checking the box, yes or no, that you have them. When this tool shows up, now is when, if I click on it, it says that we have a Linux database that is storing, processing, or transmitting CUI specified CTI, controlled technical information. That's when the wrench shows up. And I'm going to quickly show you how to make that association. So right now, I'll do it with this naval nuclear information. I'll check this box here. Now, if I go over to my tools and let's find one that kind of makes sense, I guess we'll do the Linux databases as well. So here I have a database and it's a CUI asset. So now under this CUI icon, I can click on it and then further identify the type of CUI that is stored, processed, or transmitted in this asset. So I'll go and click Naval Nuclear. And now when I make that box, that's how that wrench shows up. So now if I go back to my CUI inventory, Naval Nuclear, now instead of a checkbox, it shows a wrench because I've very clearly identified the assets that are working or touching that type of information. That's up to you if you want to make it, track it that granular. You could just leave the checkbox, but you then can further associate specific assets. I just wanted to show you that capability. Going back though to that asset real quick. Oops, under compliance. I just want to point out that, let me unselect these. You do have to have the asset categorized as a CUI asset in order for you to then select the types of CUI. If I have it anything other than CUI asset, I'm not going to be able to select this if I give it a second. See, it grays it out. Okay. So if you're trying to select a type of CUI category, then that means you have a CUI asset and it has to align in order for you to further identify your data type. Okay. Any questions so far? All right, so then we have a sensitive data inventory. So this is a place for you to identify if you want. We have some clients that choose to use this and some clients that don't, but it's meant to identify any other sensitive information that your company wants to protect, maybe like confidential information or proprietary information, or maybe employees' social security numbers, okay? Stuff like that that you want to identify and track and associate with specific assets. You can do so under sensitive data. Settings here. One, you can enable ticket integration, ticket systems. So you can link your local ticketing system, if you have one, to FutureFeed. And then you would be able to send POEM actions and POEM project updates to that ticketing system. So here we have the FutureFeed support@futurefeed.co email address in here. When people email that email address, it makes a ticket in our ticketing system. And if this isn't enabled, where you find this capability is over up here under your FutureFeed POEM. If I scroll down, first I have to zoom out. If I scroll down, see there's this envelope here. I can't click on it because I don't have that enabled. But if I did have it enabled, then I can email my ticketing system directly from FutureFeed. So now I can send an email. And it's only in your POEM area that you find it. So here's your system POEMs, and then under your system project POEM projects, you can also email your ticketing system. If you click on the mail, then it lists out the details, and then you can type up some notes here about that, okay? And hit send. A trick here though is that you could put anybody's email in there. You could put your own if you want. So I've seen it where we have some clients that don't have a ticketing system tool, and so they've created a shared inbox for their management team, their compliance management team, so that way they can send POAM updates to that shared inbox, and anybody who has access to it on the compliance management team could get those updates for POAM items. So it's any email in there will do. In FutureFeed, there's a few things that trigger a POAM to be created. And when that POAM is created, it's going to have a due date in it. Here's how you control that default due date that's populated. And these by quarters. So if I create a POAM today, how many quarters out do I want that POAM to be due? The organizational scale, impact, effort, and cost. This is important, and it comes into play again when you get into your system POAMs. So when you make a POAM in FutureFeed, you have the option to identify for that system flaw, deficiency, non-compliance, what is the impact to your organization's cybersecurity posture, how much effort is it going to take to get that POAM item remediated or implemented, and is there any cost? Like the vulnerability scanner situation I said. You don't have a vulnerability scanner, but you need to acquire one. You either need to pay someone for that service, or you need to acquire a tool and do it yourself. So there's going to be costs there. How much is it costing? So what you're doing here is you're first need to define the scale for your company, so that way everybody who is creating POAMs or managing POAMs, they're all speaking the same language. Okay, so if you're a big company, a minor cost for you guys, IT budget wise, cybersecurity budget wise, might be $5,000 if you're a big company. If you're a small company, you might have a smaller IT budget, in which case a low impact cost item, maybe, $500. Okay. But so you take some time to work with the team, and you set the language so that way everybody's speaking the same language with regards to impact, effort, and cost of remediation or implementation efforts. Now, when you set this, where you see it and you can refer back to it is up in the top right of the screen. There's a little ruler here. You can click on it. Give it a second. I know this still says 5,000, even though I changed it to 500 here. It takes a couple minutes to update. I don't know why, but eventually then you can just refer back to this scale, especially when you're working like in the system POAM area. If you need to refer back to what that scale is to your company, you can see it. I think that was the last setting. Yep, so that's the last setting and the last page in the start area. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to cover framework. So here, I don't know if you caught it, but when you log into FutureFeed, you have a FedRAMP warning banner that shows up, and if you're a system administrator in your environment, you could disable that. Maybe you'd want to consider disabling it if your company doesn't have any sort of FedRAMP requirements for a tool like this. So we just give that there's some people who are using this tool and they don't have CMMC requirements. So, all right, so that's the start area. So quickly, I'm going to go over to people, tools, and documents. All right, so under people, this is where if you're a system admin, only system administrators can add new users. If you're a standard user, you can see this icon here, you can see this button, but you can't click on it. All right, so this is where your system admin is going to create accounts for everybody who needs to access FutureFeed. That's going to take some identifying of who, right? And think about the requirements. Think about the NIST 800-171 requirements. Uh, who's all involved with implementing those requirements and getting them, maintaining that implementation. Those are the people you're going to want to create access to FutureFeed for. We have this thing called no access. I want to highlight that quick. So what this is essentially you're just identifying an employee in FutureFeed by name. For the purpose of being able to clearly, like under a control, I'll show you under a control, the RACI area. Here's the responsibility where you're identifying everybody who's responsible for this one control requirement. So if I want to tag someone as responsible by individual, I need to be able to find their name, okay? So if you want to be able to clearly identify someone as being responsible for something by name, role, or that maybe they're part of a team, you can create them account in FutureFeed. It's essentially you're just logging their name, but they don't really have access to FutureFeed. And that's just for the purpose of being able to clearly identify someone as responsible. However, if you do end up identifying that person as responsible for a lot of things, you might want to just consider them giving them standard access, because then you can really leverage FutureFeed's task, like in the dashboard, they can see everything they have assigned to them. They can get notifications when they have a new task assigned to them or a new poem assigned to them. They would then complete all these tasks. They'd log into FutureFeed, get them completed, and log artifacts or evidence that that task has been completed into FutureFeed. So you might want to consider just giving them access to your FutureFeed environment so that way they can really leverage the full suite of compliance management tools, communication tools, and evidence, activity completion, logging evidence, that type of stuff. After you create your users, then you would want to set up some security roles, okay? We have some built-in default roles here. These ones are typical. Most companies have these individuals. However, if you don't, let's say you don't have an incident team lead, you can make it not applicable, okay? To create a role, you just add new role, define it. In FutureFeed, when you're assigning responsibility, you should try to always assign responsibility to a role or a team. So that way, this Cynthia, let's say Cynthia, she's our incident team lead. If I went in to the IR security control requirements, the incident response security control requirements, these three here, and I identified Cynthia by individual, okay, if I tagged her here, then that assignment of responsibility is associated with her name. Okay, it's associated with her name. So now if Cynthia leaves the company, she quits. What someone's going to have to do is they're going to have to log into FutureFeed, figure out everything that was assigned to Cynthia, and go reassign it to someone else. That's going to happen, especially once these CMMC is not a one and done thing. You get the requirements implemented, and then throughout the life cycle of that contract and throughout those next 3 years, then you have to things have to stay in a compliant state. And so you're going to have stuff that needs to be done throughout the year, okay? So if someone quits, you got to go reassign that to someone else so that activity, that required activity, can be completed. Versus if you assign it to the role, okay? So let me see if I just hit back. Will it get me there? Should. So over here, if I assign it to the incident team lead role, right now it says Cynthia, but what happens is you can go in here and just change out her name to whoever's picking up that role and all those responsibilities. So it makes your management efforts greatly reduces your management efforts. Okay. Let me know if I wasn't clear on that. So just to recap, in FutureFeed, when you're assigning responsibility, try to assign responsibility to a role or a team. So that way, if that individual leaves, you can come into the roles in the teams area and just switch out whoever's taking over that role. And now when Robert logs in, he's going to see everything Cynthia was supposed to be working on um, under the incident team lead role. And then with your teams over here, it's as easy as clicking on the team. Okay, Jason and Robert left, and now it's going to be James and Brett. Okay, anybody who's a part of this team can see the responsibilities assigned to that team. So that's a little trick there to make your life easier throughout the years. This default accountable role, what is this? Like I said, in FutureFeed, there's many instances where you create a poem in FutureFeed. And if you set this, that poem is automatically going to be assigned to whoever you set here. Okay. Manage teams. Here is you'd add a new team to create teams. If you want to leverage some pre-built teams, click on the populate button right there. These are pre-built teams. Let's say you have system and network administrators. You'd click the box to make that team. Now this team is going to be already associated with these 79 security control requirements that are very technical. And that can help you start divvying up the work, especially if you're just getting started with these frameworks. Okay. Then you would create the team, go find the team, click on it, and then add members to the team. And now those members of that team can see those 79 security control requirements as being part of their responsibility, and they go check them out. All right, under tools and documents here, the activity is very same. So I'm gonna run through tools and then you can apply it to the documents area. So in here, under tools and documents, you're gonna start logging your tools and logging your security documents. To do that, you just hit the plus button and you start typing things out. So here, let's say we're gonna log a database. And it's a SQL database. And is it in the cloud, or is it on-prem, or is it managed and owned by a service provider? So hit, identify it and hit plus. Now I've just created a SQL database inventory item in FutureFeed. So that's how you add them. You just hit the plus button and start typing it out. Unfortunately, we don't have any like import capability right now, but here, if you add a tool, you just essentially like you're typing a list. Now, no, I'm in the active area, so anything I create up here, that means it's already in production. It's already being used by the company. If you scroll down to the bottom, here's your pending. Here's things where you're planning to acquire that tool. You'd add them down here. And it's on your poem. If you forget and you add them in the wrong place, no worries. You just open it up. Let me open up this SQL database. Again, just open it up and you can switch it between active and pending up here. Okay. But after you log your technology, then you open up the inventory item and you start filling out all these fields. So the overview, okay. If this database was being managed by an external service provider, you can identify that shared responsibility here under the customer responsibility matrix area. You might want to upload the service level agreement or maybe the, licensing agreement for this database. Upload that type of stuff. Again, work on connecting it to the controls. So if this database was a CUI database, for me, the controls I'd want to connect is, maybe encryption because there's a requirement for CUI at rest needs to be encrypted. Well, it's at rest in my database. Also access to your database. Is it controlled? So you'd want to associate the access controls, the MFA controls, the remote controls. A lot of stuff gets associated to assets. Essentially, you're saying that this 31311 security control requirement needs to be implemented on this asset. Compliance, categorize the asset, identify if it has FCI in it as well. Feel free to further identify the CUI data types in it. Some other oversight and compliance related fields there for you to fill out. Tasks, I'll show you that in a second, and then you have a place to upload evidence. Okay. I want to say something on this customer responsibility matrix area. If you don't, I mean, yours is going to be blank here. But to see a listing of customer responsibility matrices in FutureFeed, you're going to do that under Documents. Under Reference Documents, there's a CRM category. So once you log a CRM here, shared responsibility here, then that's when it shows up in that drop-down button of the tools. Okay. So under tools, just start logging your assets. Again, I would recommend logging everything and then relying on that asset category to really identify things that are in scope and things that are out of scope. If you have something that's out of scope, do that analysis to make sure it really should be categorized as out of scope. Is it physically and logically separated from your CUI database? And then try to provide that definition in FutureFeed and log that evidence in FutureFeed because you're going to need it when you have that conversation with your assessors. We have a place for vulnerabilities. Here's where you could upload your vulnerability scan. All open vulnerabilities will then be entered onto your system POAM. We really categorize technology. So here's where you define your on-prem, online service providers. Sometimes people have specific assets, okay, like a 3D printer or a CNC machine. Those would fall under like specific asset types. You could log them. Vendors, any vendors you're working with, and then another place to visualize and see your budget related to all these tools that you've logged. The documents, same thing here. You would just create the security documentation that your company may already you already have, or maybe some security documentation that you're going to be developing. Okay, again, you have an active area and a POAM area or pending area. Hit the plus button, categorize it. What are you logging? Plan, policy, procedure, worksheet. No, right now I'm in the working documents area, which only has plan, policies, procedure, worksheets. If I'm over here and I hit add, then my options are diagrams, list, CRM, okay? But you're just, what's the type of document and give it a name and hit add. That's how you create the inventory items for your security documents. And then in here, you'd click in here. Let me go to one that's a bit easier to speak to. Here is a policy. Here we got an access control policy. So your company has an access control policy. Is it approved and enforced? Then it's active. Are you still working on it? Then it's pending and it should be on your POAM. You have a couple decisions to make as far as document management. Do you want to develop, edit, maintain, and approve documents directly in FutureFeed? If you do, then that's when you would use this live document area. This is a document editor, okay? You can type out documents here, edit them, modify them. It creates a history. You can restore back to old versions. You can see what was changed, who made that changed. You have templates. If you don't have an access control policy to start with, you can go and use the ones that we have available to you in FutureFeed. Okay. Or some companies already have their documents well established and maintained elsewhere, so you could just upload. You definitely would want to upload the latest and greatest approved version of your access control policy. You'd attach it then here. Because you're also building out the evidence that an assessor will see. So you want a version of that document in FutureFeed that's evidence. Or you can add links over here. You can find the chain link icon. And if you have that document sitting on SharePoint and you really only want to keep it in SharePoint, you can just add a link then pointing to where that document is housed. So, a couple different ways to manage or upload documents in a FutureFeed, identify documents in a FutureFeed. But again, you just open up the document card and fill out connect it. So here's all the controls that are being met or supported by some statements in my access control policy. Task assignments. I know I'm at time, but let me just finish up my thought here. So under procedure, let's say I'm going to go into this risk assessment procedure. Here's where your task assignments come into play. Tasks, you create tasks for anything that needs to be done initially to get things implemented. So if this procedure was still in a draft, I could create a task asking someone to review it and provide input to the risk assessment procedure. And that would be a one-time task. You'd get it assigned to someone, it doesn't need to repeat, hit submit. That person then will get notification if they have FutureFeed access of that new assignment, that new task assignment. They'll come in here, click on it, they'll be able to review and edit the live document. But this is also where you're going to create tasks for things that have to happen throughout the year. Okay, so there's an annual risk assessment requirement. So you might want to make an annual risk assessment task and then set it to repeat for annually. Get it assigned to the risk assessment team and hit submit. And now you have a task that's going to trigger every year and alert the right people. You know, a year is a long time, but think about like vulnerability scanning. You have to perform vulnerability scanning on a defined frequency, monthly, weekly. You might want to create a recurring task so that way that person gets notification, hey, it's time to run the vulnerability scan. And oh, by the way, read the procedures because after you run the vulnerability scan, you have to take that report and send it over to the right person and communicate those results to the right people and maybe update your system POAM, right? So change management. Maybe you have like a monthly change management board. You might want to create a task for that. So I'm sorry I went a couple minutes over and I do have to jump for a meeting. I see there's a couple questions I'll try to ask before I go, but this is where we're going to stop today. Next session we'll continue on. And if you join the next session and you have questions about stuff we covered today, feel free to ask them. But your plan of attack should be fill out the start area, get people access to your environment, define your roles and teams and get people assigned to them. Then start logging the technology and categorizing it and connecting it to the security control requirements. And then start logging your security documentation, getting it connected to the security control requirements. And then within tools and documents, start creating those tasks to get things moving along. All right. Couple questions here. Oh, no, just people having to drop. Okay, so any other questions? If not, I will end the session and thank you for your time. Okay, bye all. Thank you.